The sun burned low over the dry, Wyoming prairie as Sheriff Colt Mercer rode toward the abandoned wagon he'd spotted from the ridge earlier that morning. The kind of wagon that shouldn't have been there. The kind that told him trouble had come silently in the night. Dust curled behind his boots when he dismounted, scanning the lifeless field, expecting coyotes or an empty husk of supplies. But instead he froze when he saw a small, trembling figure pressed against the wagon wheel. A young girl, no older than 14, sat clutching her swollen belly with one hand and something bundled tightly with the other. Her clothes were torn, sun-cracked, and she looked like she hadn't had food or water in days. The girl lifted her eyes slowly, and in the faintest whisper he barely heard, she said, "Please, help us." Colt, hardened by years of riding the frontier and burying more strangers than he cared to count, felt something shift deep inside his chest. There was fear in her voice, but not the fear of pain, nor the fear of death. It was the fear of someone still being hunted. He stepped closer, hands raised, fighting to keep his voice steady as he said, "You're safe now, darling. No one's going to hurt you." But the girl shook her head, hugging the small bundle tighter. "You don't understand," she whispered. "They'll come back for him," Colt frowned, thinking she meant her unborn child, until he noticed the bundle in her arms move. A tiny hand, pale and shaking, slipped from the blanket. The cowboy's heart punched inside his ribs. She wasn't alone. She'd already given birth, and the baby couldn't have been more than a day old. Colt knelt in front of her, forcing his voice into that calm tone he used with injured horses and dying men. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lena," she murmured. "Lena Mae Carter." Colt nearly choked on the breath he sucked. "And Carter, as in the Carter family who'd vanished in the spring, wagon overturned, horses missing, their homestead burned to ash. Folks thought bandits had gotten them. Some thought they ran off, but no one expected a child from that family would still be alive." Colt swallowed hard and asked the question gently, "Lena, what happened?" She looked past him toward the far ridge, as if she expected shadows to rise from the ground any minute. "Men came," she whispered. "Men wearing red bandanas. They said we owed them for crossing their land. Papa tried to talk to them, but they took him. Mama told me to run. She put the baby in my arms before they dragged her away." The baby squirmed softly, a small whimper cracking the girl's fragile composure. Colt felt nausea burn in his throat, not at the girl, not at the infant, but at the cruelty people were capable of in a world with so few witnesses. "How far have you walked?" he asked. "Since yesterday morning," she said, voice breaking. "I kept going. I didn't know where else to go." Colt looked at her, sunburned face, dried tears in her dirt-streaked cheeks, hands shaking from exhaustion and fear, and he realized that this girl had walked further with a newborn in her arms than most. Hardened men could survive. "Listen, Lena," he said, voice firm. "I'm taking you to my ranch. You'll get water, food, rest. Then I'll go after the men who did this." She opened her mouth to protest, fear written all over her, but Colt placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone anymore." His horse huffed behind him, tired from the long ride, but Colt lifted the girl onto the saddle with surprising gentleness, cradling the baby in one arm before handing the child back once she was settled. "Hold tight," he said. As he swung up behind her, he scanned the open land. Something didn't feel right. A rancher knew when he was being watched. Through the heat haze, he spotted faint dust, far off but moving. Riders, whoever they were heading toward the abandoned wagon. And when they didn't find Lena by the time Colt reached his ranch with Lena and the newborn, night had settled over the plains like a thick blanket, muffling sound and sharpening danger. The horses neighed uneasily, picking up the scent of strangers on the wind. Colt's ranch wasn't big, but it was home. Sturdy wood, stone chimney, wide porch, and enough land to keep a family safe if they needed it. He helped Lena down from the saddle just as her legs buckled under her weight, catching her before she fell. "Easy," he murmured. "You've done enough for 10 lifetimes." He carried her inside, where his housekeeper, Miriam, gasped at the sight of the girl and the tiny infant. Without hesitation, she lit lamps, heated water, and brought blankets fresh off the line. Lena cried into Miriam's arms, not from pain, but from the sudden shock of finally being safe. Colt stood guard near the doorway, watching every shadow outside as if it might leap at them. He hadn't forgotten the riders in the distance. After Lena and the baby were settled, Miriam cornered Colt in the kitchen. "Tell me," she demanded, voice sharp with worry. "What trouble have you brought home?" Colt explained everything: the burned homestead, the men with red bandanas, the baby, the tracks he'd seen on the way back. When he finished, Miriam crossed herself. "Outlaw," she muttered. "The Carter girl wasn't meant to live." "That's why they'll come," Colt nodded grimly. He knew it too. When he stepped back outside, the sky was thick with stars, but the silence felt wrong. Too still, too expectant, the kind of quiet that comes before violence. He saddled his second horse, checked the rifle, the shotgun, the revolver on his hip, and then walked to the porch where Lena sat awake, rocking the baby while the lantern's glow softened her young, tired face. "You don't have to fight them," she whispered. "They'll kill you like they killed my father." Colt crouched next to her. "Lena, I've been through more gunfire than those boys can imagine, and I'm not letting anyone take you or that baby." She stared at him, eyes glistening. "Why?" Colt didn't need to think. "Because someone should have helped you sooner. Because you deserve a life. Because that child deserves a chance to grow." Before she could answer, the distant thunder of hooves cracked the air. Colt stood so fast the lantern flickered. Dust rolled on the horizon, several riders moving fast. The outlaws had found her trail. He turned to Lena. "Inside. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." She obeyed instantly, disappearing into the house. Colt walked out onto the open dirt yard as the riders slowed to a halt, their horses snorting hard in the cold night air. 6 men, masked with red bandanas, rifles slung over their shoulders. The one in front, bigger than the rest, spat into the dirt. "Evening, Sheriff," he drawled. "Looks like you found something that belongs to us." Colt's jaw tightened. "She's a child," he said. "And that baby isn't yours." The outlaw laughed. "Everything on these plains is ours if we want it." Colt's fingers brushed the grip of his revolver. "Not tonight." What followed happened so fast the stars barely had time to blink. The outlaw leader reached for his rifle. Colt fired first. The shot cracked through the stillness, sending the leader tumbling off his horse. Chaos erupted, gunfire, shouts, hooves slamming into dirt. Colt ducked behind the water trough, firing clean, disciplined shots. 2 outlaws dropped. The others panicked, scattering, scrambling for cover. Colt moved with the sharp, practiced precision of a man who'd survived war, storms, and more ambushes than he could count. Within moments, 4 of the 6 outlaw riders lay wounded or dead. The last 2 fled into the darkness, their courage evaporating. Colt didn't chase them. He only stared after them until the night swallowed their silhouettes. When he finally stepped back onto the porch, Lena flung the door open, baby in her arms, tears streaming down her face. "I thought," she choked. Colt pulled her close, careful not to jostle the infant. "You're safe," he said softly. "Both of you." Miriam appeared behind her, whispering a prayer of thanks. And in that quiet moment, under the starlit sky, with danger fading into the distance, Lena breathed for the first time without fear. The nightmare was over. The long road ahead would be hard, but it would be theirs. Colt placed a gentle hand on the baby's head. "Welcome home, little one," he murmured. "No one's ever going to hurt you." Again, and with the first light of dawn, cresting the horizon, the cowboy kept his silent promise. There, they'd follow her tracks. Colt nudged his horse forward, quickening the pace. "Colt," Lena whispered, breath unsteady. "Are they coming?" He didn't have to answer. The fear tightening his jaw said enough. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, casting long shadows across the plains, the cowboy made a silent vow. He would protect this girl and her baby, even if it meant facing the worst men the West had ever produced.